Hello and welcome to the Queer Vision podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Becca, and this is,
Koe Star or Koe of Kanekalon.
and we're here with Michael G. Williams. He is a horror and queer author. He writes as a queer person and also queer characters. He's so insightful about everything that he does. You'll learn a lot about yourself listening to this, so stay tuned.
Thank you for sitting down on the Queer Vision podcast today. We're so excited to just be here with you and learn more about you and all that stuff.
I was going to say, thanks for having me. This is really fabulous.
Of course. Yeah, if you just want to give the audience a little rundown of who you are, your name, pronouns, all that fun stuff, just so they know who you are.
Sure thing. I'm Michael G. Williams. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am a queer horror and sometimes science fiction author. Specifically, I'm queer and a horror author, but also I write queer horror. And I also co-host a podcast about folklore and myths and legends and hidden history and modern weird and all kinds of stuff in the Carolinas called Arcane Carolinas.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel like Ellen is somebody else that's in our group. Doesn't do anything with the podcast, but is in Queerlina, and she does scents based off of fandoms.
Yeah.
And I feel like she might have mentioned your podcast because she does one that's based off of like folklore, and it's a podcast. So I feel like she might have mentioned your podcast to us.
Did she, by any chance, sell fragrances at a convention in Winston-Salem called Congregate a couple of weeks ago?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong.
I
I don't
asked
think so.
because there was somebody there who was selling fragrances based off of fandoms, and I was there, and I bought some for my husband. So,
Oh, well, there you go.
yeah.
No, I think that she only does like the multi-day ones because
Okay.
setting up is annoying, but
Yeah.
Hmm, small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this podcast, I know, so you said, is it based on just folklore in North Carolina? Or is it like just everywhere?
Every now and then we branch out, but
Hmm.
mostly it is legends and lore from North and South Carolina.
Oh,
And
wow.
there is so much
Yeah.
Hmm.
that we have hundreds of stories left to talk about in our existing list of topics to explore. And, I got asked recently what I thought the end game for Arcane Carolinas would be. And I said, oh, we're going to do this until one of us is dead,
Yeah.
because like we're never going to run out of stuff to talk about.
Hmm.
And there's so many stories. We have so many ghost stories in the Carolinas, so many cryptid stories in the Carolinas. Three of the top 10 counties in the United States for UFO sightings are in South Carolina. So there
Oh,
are countless UFO stories to talk about. Uh, I saw a UFO in South Carolina, like all kinds of stuff. So there are fascinating stories and a ton of really interesting history, a ton of history that does not get talked about in class, but is very important. Stuff
mhm.
like the fact that there was a widespread abolitionist secret society that resisted the Confederacy in the Piedmont of North Carolina for the entire duration of the war. The fact that there was a Lumbee gentleman named Henry Berry Lowry who led an uprising against Confederate authorities in Robeson County, North Carolina, during the Civil War, and
Mm.
basically went on the lam and ran a guerrilla war against the Confederacy successfully for years. So,
Wow.
That's awesome.
really fascinating stories of resistance in the Carolinas that do not get talked about in high school history classes because nobody's really sure how to talk about that and keep their job.
Yeah.
That's true. How did you get into this then?
My co-host Charlie, we used to work together, and for reasons of happenstance, we wound up in cubes next to each other at the far end of the office from everybody else. We had been in this long row of cubes, and the people that were between us and everybody else either moved to different groups or switched jobs or whatever. All of a sudden, there were a bunch of empty cubes between us and everybody else. And we started talking, I think, about the X Files, maybe? I don't remember. but we both realized we were both into weird stuff, and
Mhm.
we're instantly fast friends.
Wow.
Wow.
It is. It's always interesting. I don't know, just like hearing the stories about how like life and the universe, whatever, will just like bring people together.
Hmm.
And then I don't know. It's always so interesting to me. Like we started Queerlina because I actually moved into the house right across the street
Yeah.
from Rebecca. So we met that way. And then Ellen, who we were talking about previously, was the previous owner of the house that me and my partner own now. So it's just funny how the world works, you
It
know?
is. So much happens just by coincidence, and
Mhm.
I
Yes.
don't necessarily assign meaning to it, but sometimes it really does feel like the universe just says, okay, you and that person need to be friends.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's hard not to assign meaning sometimes. I feel like I do the same thing, but then I'm like, I don't know. By even just saying that, I feel like I'm like, there is something there in the universe that's telling us where we need to go sometimes. They're like giving us like little nudge.
Hmm. I
It's
mean,
like,
I'm a believer. Between Charlie and me, I am the Scully. Or I'm the Mulder. I'm the one who wants to believe. So in a lot of ways, I do assign meaning, but I don't always say that part out loud.
That's fair.
yeah, it's like, I don't know if oxymoron's the right word, but it's like by like saying, oh, it doesn't, I don't know, like by not giving meaning, you're kind of also giving meaning. I
Hmm.
don't know if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. In my head, I'm like, I don't know if it made a
Okay.
lot of sense, but I'm like, I feel like when you're like, oh, none of it really matters. Like, we're all just living this experience at the same time.
That's kind of assigning meaning because being able to just be in existence is a meaning.
Yeah, I guess that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yeah. I
I
don't
was
know.
trying to figure out what it was the entire time I was saying that sentence. So,
Also, there is kind of a way in which, by not openly saying, "Oh, I think that there's a lot of meaning behind these random events,"
Hmm.
we are allowing, if we do believe in that meaning, for that meaning to be its own thing, for that
Hmm.
for that assignment of circumstance to
mhm.
happen without us trying to hold the reins. And that's a
Yeah,
kind of way to like keep that in its own little sacred space and also not interfere, you know?
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I think that's a more articulated way of what I was trying to say. Because when you just trust and let whatever happen, and you're like, okay, it is what it is, then
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
This would be the
Anyway,
appropriate time for you to talk about big magic to another person.
not big magic. Okay, since you brought it up, I'm so obsessed with this book. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. If you consider yourself a creative at all, which I mean,
Hmm.
you're a writer, so I'm assuming you probably do. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. She talks a lot about just how like creativity is outside of us and how it's kind of something that flows through us rather than it
Hmm.
being a piece of us. I don't know. As a creative, that book has helped me a lot and like really shaped the way I view creativity and like placing a lot of like weight on it and whatnot. I don't know. It's a really freeing stance to be like, okay, this I'm just like a conduit for this thing, um, and it's not all me.
Yeah. I, I very much agree with that notion. Uh, the classic question that people get is, where do you get your ideas? And I think the answer I hear from every honest writer is, oh, it beats the shit out of me. You know, like it just, they happen. You see something weird. Isaac Asimov and Stephen King and Anne Rice all said this at various points, that all of their new ideas were just two old ideas sort of bumping into each other in the hallway of
Mm,
the mind. And I think that that's true for all of us. It just feels like they come from some other place, you know.
yeah.
And I don't know a way to make that happen. I never say, well, I'm going to sit down and have an idea for a book now.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually me standing in line at the grocery store or something, and then I think, oh God, I've got to remember that. I've got to remember that because
Mm-hmm.
something happens, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is, and that's something that I've even found like as a creative with my own creative process. The more mundanity I have in life, in a way, like the more ideas I'm gonna have. So if I'm
Hmm.
doing a mundane task, washing the dishes, sweeping, whatever, it's like, oh, that's when it clicks.
Yeah,
It's so interesting.
Hmm.
absolutely. It's that old, it's kind of that old French saying of l'esprit d'esclair. I probably just mispronounced it because I took Spanish, but the spirit of the staircase. The
Oh.
idea of you come up with the great retort as soon as you're leaving the party, and it's that notion of like our brains need to cook on stuff for a while.
Mhm.
Some
Yeah.
people call it shower ideas or whatever,
Mhm.
but it's that idea of you kind of put your brain in neutral, and then there's some part of your mind that takes over and starts chewing on stuff, and then all of a sudden some weird idea comes out of nowhere when you were not anticipating that. That was not the goal of whatever your activity was. And I think
Mhm.
that's a very true experience for a lot of us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would
Yeah, that's
agree.
fair. I feel like I always have that conversation, and then like 3 days later I'll be like, ah, this would have been the perfect response to that.
Mhm.
This is, see, everybody calls me an overthinker. I think that whenever I think of things ahead of time to say in imaginary conversations that may or may not happen, it's actually just me preempting that so that I don't feel stupid 3 days after a conversation.
Or you just accept that's just how it is.
That's not happening.
Oh my god.
Big mood. Big mood.
So, you're an author.
Hmm.
So you said your books were, you said they were more like folklore. You said fantasy,
Horror.
sci-fi, horror. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
I do horror
Okay,
mostly
cool.
these
Okay.
days. um,
Okay.
it, to some degree, I just sort of get dragged around by the uh, untamed horses of the imagination, and whatever seems like a great idea that just can't not bother me. Like
Mhm.
sometimes you have an idea and it just keeps telling you, hey, I need to be written, I need to be written, I need to be written.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And you just have to write it to get it out of your system. I
Mhm.
am cursed with too many ideas as a writer, and ones that I really want to get to have the play experience of writing. And so at the moment, that is all horror.
Mhm.
In some ways, that's because that's the genre that I feel is most appropriate to our times. And in some ways, that's just the genre where I kind of feel like I've found my best voice. And
Yeah.
in some ways, that's because that's the best support network that I've got at the moment.
Mhm.
I've become very active in HWA and in the North Carolina chapter of Horror Writers Association, which
Oh
is
wow.
just an exceptionally supportive group of people. Really, really intelligent and brave and welcoming and not gatekeepy at all about who is and is
Mhm.
not a writer, who is and is not in.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so, there are several people in the chapter that joined having never had anything published who have subsequently had things published. There are people who joined having never had anything published who still aren't totally sure that they want to write anything, but they really love horror. And there are some of us who have a bunch of books that are out, and there's everybody in between. And it's just a very supportive environment. So that has made me really want to focus on horror as my
Mhm.
genre. But also, these are times in which it is awfully satisfying to write books in which bad things happen to bad people. So, what can I
Yeah.
say? But my experience is that I have so many different ideas that I just kind of actually don't write them down or try too hard to remember them because the good ones will stick around. They're just going to have
Mhm.
to fight in the back of my head in the sieve that is my memory. They're just going to have to fight it out with each other, and whichever ones survive are the ones that are going to get written.
Mhm.
So at the moment, I have my latest book was horror. The next 3 books that I'm writing are horror. I know the next 5 things I'm writing and the order in which I'll write them because they're ideas that I just can't let go of. So I have to write
Mhm.
them. So I know what I'll be writing for like the next 6 years, you know. But that's the thing. Horror, like I've written some science fiction. I really enjoyed writing science fiction.
Mhm.
I've written urban fantasy. I've really enjoyed writing urban fantasy. I kind of feel like I scratched those itches, and
Mhm.
the new ideas that crop up are all horror related. So, and specifically, I really love writing horror that's set in Appalachia. I love writing horror
Mhm.
that's set in Western North Carolina. That's where I grew up, and where there are lots of story opportunities for bad things to happen. So, I don't know. Horror to me at the moment is a really effective way to process the anxiety that I'm feeling about the world and the anger that I feel at the world and a lot of the queer experience that I've lived through and all kinds of stuff. Aging, horror is a great genre for talking about all sorts of internal emotional
Yeah.
experiences. And
Mhm.
so I really enjoy that.
That's really cool. I feel
Yeah.
like So I grew up in Appalachian, Ohio, so like a
Hmm.
little different, but like you do hear so many like horror stories and like it's just like don't listen to the whistling, like things like that. It's just like ingrained in you if you've like lived in Appalachia, right? And so like I feel like it's so interesting because you can bring that folklore
Hmm.
in a horror way, but then also be talking about like real life experiences. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That is really cool. How long have you been writing then?
My first published book was published in 2012, but
Okay.
prior
Oh.
to that, I wrote 9 novels purely for my own entertainment. And nobody should write to make money is one of my first rules. If I'm
Yeah.
going to
Fair.
write, if I'm going to write something, it's to entertain myself.
Mm-hmm.
And if I entertain myself, then mission accomplished. Anything that happens after that is just frosting on the cake. So uh, I wrote a bunch of novels just to entertain myself. I had one friend who wanted to read them. She would make me send her the PDF at the end of each one. She just read raw first drafts for 9 books and kept saying, "These are really good. When you do the next one, send it to me." I don't think they were really good, but I loved having the sport.
Yeah.
And I started writing, though, when I was a child. And the first time I tried to write a book, I was in 3rd grade. It wasn't a very good book, but I was really engaged in trying to write it, you know.
That's
Mm-hmm.
so cool though.
Yeah, I grew up in a family with a lot of storytelling, a lot of,
Mhm.
a lot of sitting around listening to older people tell just the wildest possible stories of their childhood. And, people who grew up like way up the mountain and had some real tales, some of which
Mm-hmm.
maybe were exaggerated and some of which were 100% documented truth.
Yeah.
And either way, very entertaining. And got, uh, that really cultivated that in me. I really wanted to be able to participate in some sort of storytelling tradition.
I
That is
love
so
that.
cool.
I love the way that like I can already tell like I don't know, just the way you look at creativity. Like I'm glad that you brought up the part of like having so many ideas and like accepting that you're not going to get to all of them
Hmm.
and that some of them will just be like left in the background. That's something that I'm like trying to like implement more now as well because I have so many there's so many good I do drag and I do more like the makeup side thing. So that's like my art form. And I'm just accepting, like, okay, some ideas I'm going to have for like a performance or a video. And I don't always have a stage. Like, I'm not always going to be doing every single thing that I think of. And some of them are going to just fade to the background, and that's okay. Um, I think that's a really powerful way to look at it. And also, not putting the stress of like money on your creativity, I think, is such a big thing that so many creatives struggle with. Because I mean, ideally, we all would love to just live off of the thing that we love doing, but there has to be balance because when you put all that pressure on something that in a way is like, I don't want to say creativity is delicate, but like can be, at times. And I feel like putting all that pressure can definitely it can hurt your art some, and it does make it where it's like, oh, now it's easier to get sidetracked and do things for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
really hard not to do that because like
Mm-hmm.
especially in our society, just like you're talking about all the bad things that are happening, like we're in a recession. Like it's really hard to get a job right now. Like
Hmm.
and some people are working like 3, 4 jobs, right? And then it's like, okay, well, if I take time away from these jobs where I could be making money to do this creative thing, I have to make money from it to make it worth it because, I have to
Mm-hmm.
survive, right? And so it almost inherently puts that stress on the creativity, which makes it not as creative anymore. Then it's just like an algorithm or an outlet of stress.
Hmm. Not to be an old school radical queer, but capitalism really wants to grind us to dust and then charge us for the mortar and pestle they use to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is so easy to get caught up in the idea that the only value something has is the money one makes from it.
Hmm.
Charlie, my co-host for King Carolinas, and I were talking about this just yesterday. We really, as a society, we undervalue just enjoying tinkering with something, just enjoying
Mm-hmm.
doing something for its own sake. And we get told a lot that something's not worth doing if we're not making money from it. And so we get caught up in this situation where we are pressured to pick up a side hustle that ultimately costs us more than we make from it. And we get told that because we didn't make enough money from it, we weren't any good.
Mm-hmm.
And we stop getting that. looking to it for that value of feeding the soul. And so I don't think everybody who writes has to make a ton of money at it for it to have been worthwhile. There are more years that I have had a loss than there have been years that I've had a profit as a writer. It feels really good when that profit happens because it is a form of validation, whether I like it or not. But it is, and it feels awfully good to get validated, no matter how. But it's really important that people, in my opinion, if they want to be creative and persist in that as a lifelong vocation, that the first job is to make oneself feel good as a result of the creativity, to serve some personal need that is not able to be measured in dollars. That said, if you're doing something to get paid for it and people are supposed to have paid you for it, they need to pay you. And that is the other side of the coin of make sure that you're feeding your soul. If a publisher doesn't pay you, ride them until they pay you. If if a venue or whoever, if whatever the business relationship there is supposed to result in money coming to you for something that you have put your soul into, make sure you get that money.
Exactly.
That's fair. I've seen a lot of people like in the creative community. I have like a lot of Facebook groups that they're like into knitting and stuff like that, and they'll like make things for family members that are just ungrateful, and they're like, well, you should have bought something for somebody. And it's like, I did buy something for you. I bought the materials and then I spent my time and my love making it for you. This is of
Mm-hmm.
more value than that thing that Lego set that may cost more, but it didn't
Yeah.
really. Yeah. So how do you balance that need for money, because we do have a need for money in our society, and the creative? Like, for example, right now I don't have a job. I mean, I run my own businesses, but they're not like making a profit yet, and I can't find a stable job. So I'm trying to be more creative, whatever, and hopefully make money that way until I can find a stable job. But I also don't want to burn out, like you guys are saying, and like ruin
Mm-hmm.
my creativity and not feel the value that I am getting from just like letting that out of my body. So how do you balance that of like, I want to create this for me, but I also want to create this to hopefully get something back to be able to live?
Yeah. I am very fortunate, frankly, in that I've never had to rely on creative efforts for my income. I have a day job. I have a day job career that I have extremely good luck to be in, the career that I'm in, uh, and to feel pretty secure in that career. And that is, I think, important to feeling free enough to be creative for me. Um, I think that if I had to rely on being creative for income, I would probably just panic and freeze up. So, so I don't really know how people balance that. I think that an important thing that we also forget is there's no shame in taking a job for the money that it makes. As long as it's not doing something harmful to people, then our job does not necessarily have to be what gives us satisfaction in life. I think it's perfectly okay for people's job to be what makes it possible for them to do all the other things that give them satisfaction.
Yeah. And I think that is like a good meshing of like, I don't know, almost like an older, not, I don't know, like yeah, like an older viewpoint in a way. Not calling you old, but like a more like, I don't know. I feel like the younger generation, a lot of us are like, we want to do what we love and we only want to do what we love, point blank, period. If I can't get paid for what I love, like, what's the point of doing anything? And I think there's like a good in between that as a society we need to find, or in my opinion, we need to find, and we're working closer to. And I think it is that. I think it's knowing like, hey, I can do XYZ for money, and that's okay. And my motivation for that is money. But I can also still do the things that I enjoy, and I can do something for the money so that it can feed into the thing that I really enjoy. And then
Hmm.
that is healthy. Like, not your career doesn't have to be your everything, your career or your job, whatever. You can still have other things that you feel more successful in other
Mhm.
ways than just monetarily. So I'm really glad that you brought up that point.
Yeah, there's a big difference in life between meaning and money.
Hmm.
And we get told repeatedly that money is the only form of meaning,
Hmm.
and money is so necessary that it can feel like it's the only form of meaning.
Hmm.
But it is, sometimes it is a form of meaning, but it's not the only one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard.
So,
It's
mhm.
hard.
So if it's not too personal,
Yeah.
in your like day job, is it something that's still writing related, or is it like completely
Oh,
different?
no, I work in IT.
Okay.
Mm.
There's actually a lot of advantage to being a creative person in my field. I do computer
Hmm.
security,
Hmm.
and uh, in my field in general, there are not a ton of people who are skilled at relating to other people as humans
Hmm.
and communicating. And so I have a degree in performance studies, and so I'm professionally trained to play a character. If I go to a convention, I'm a very introverted and shy person and can be very awkward. But if I go to a convention, for instance, as a writer, I can perform the character of Michael G. Williams, author, and
Hmm.
be a lot more outgoing, a lot more brave, a lot more bold about what I'll say and get up on a panel and do and things like that. And that's fine because I'm essentially playing a character. And there are times at work where I am playing the character of the IT guy who knows how to talk to people.
Mm.
Hmm.
And that has an advantage, in my industry. And certainly there are a lot of opportunities in my field for written communication that needs to be sensitive to the client. As somebody doing computer security, a lot of times when I talk to somebody, they're having one of the worst days of their career. And, because we deal with bad stuff that's happened. And uh, my part of it is specifically around trying to prevent bad stuff, but we still end up talking to people who have had bad stuff happen. So it can be very useful to have those skills, but technically, no, my day job doesn't have anything to do with it. And I'm so glad because I think that that would burn me out on the parts of writing that I most enjoy. If that were
Yeah.
something that I did 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and then I tried to do that for a couple hours on Saturday as well,
Hmm.
I don't think I would enjoy it very much.
Yeah, I think that is something that I think there are, those one-off, and I almost call them one-off, even though as a society we look at them as the main model of creative. Like I feel like when we see like big music artists and it's their whole life, or you see a painter who it was their whole life, it's like, oh, that's what as a society we think that's a creative, like that's an artist. But in reality, I think that they are more one-offs than we give credit to. I think the majority of society is more creative than we give the credit, and
Hmm.
the majority of people are in the same situation that you are and are working like this 9 to 5 to help support the other thing. And that's something I'm even starting to realize with myself. Like I'm 24, I'm still figuring out exactly how it all works for me. And I'm starting to realize like some of my favorite personal creative people have that duality. They have the 9 to 5 job that's more like logistical, and they go every day and they do their thing. But it almost makes their art more powerful in a way to me, because it's, I don't know, like you said, you have that security, you have that
Mhm.
freedom. It's not like you're putting everything on the line even more than you normally are when you are doing a creative thing, because I feel like doing any creative thing, you're putting an
A part of
aspect of
yourself out
stuff
there.
or a part of yourself out there on the line.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's really really powerful.
I think honest creativity requires vulnerability,
Hmm.
and it is very difficult to be vulnerable when one is also in every other aspect of one's life deeply at risk,
Yeah.
deeply vulnerable. I think the myth of the starving artist is just that, a myth.
Hmm.
The starving artist is probably too busy trying to figure out how to live
Yeah.
than to be an artist that can talk in a that can create the zone of safety around themselves that is required to really
Hmm.
open up and expose parts of themselves that are internal.
Yeah.
That
I
is
don't
so
know.
true. Like I feel like whenever I like writing. I do a lot of writing for the magazine. I also like have started two different novels and I'm somewhere in them. Um
Hmm.
and like it's so interesting because like I mean I'm a civil engineer. That's my degree. I am very logical and like anybody who meets me knows I'm logical. but then like it's almost like I'm too logical for the creative crowd and I'm too creative for the logical crowd. I didn't do well in engineering because they didn't like the fact that I thought outside the box, let's be honest. And so like it's so interesting because like whenever I started writing things for the magazine, that's when I started like feeling emotions more again. Like not like I didn't feel emotions, let's be honest. I'm a woman, I will cry at the drop of a hat, but like crying and feeling are two different things. And so like I'd be sitting there and like I specifically remember writing one article where it was like for Women's History Month and it's like where do I fit in Women's History Month? Like what is Women's History Month about? Why is it only like relegated to like 1 month? And I started talking about my mom because I was like there's so many people that have done like mundane things that are just they nobody cares it like in the moment, but then like if you look back at history they're the ones that made the space for everybody to be able to like live their
Mm-hmm.
lives. And so like I just started like bawling. I was like this is where we are right now. This is like the people that are doing the everyday stuff, the ones that are making our computers safe are the ones that are making it so that we can have online banking that makes things easier. The ones that like are sitting there plugging and chugging on a computer, the ones that making our roads safe so that we don't die every single time that we get out on a car. And it's just like it's so I don't know. I just feel like there's such an outlet to this creative stuff that like I don't know, hearing you talk just kind of put it together in my brain. It just put it together. Thanks. That's all.
I I really feel your pain there. And as a consequence of a conversation that my co-host and I had while we were on a panel at a convention, I made myself a T-shirt to wear at conventions that reads "Dour Gay Vulcan" because I can come off as very clinical sometimes, often because I'm not sure what emotional response is appropriate. And so I just sort of lock everything down. I just don't express one and wait
Mm-hmm.
for a signal of what it is I am expected to do. That says a lot about my particular neuroscience, neurochemistry there. But it's that's the mode that is safest a lot of times. And so that's
Yeah.
what I'm in. And so sometimes at work, I am the person who makes the like weird literary reference that nobody understands or the weird film reference that nobody understands, and people just stare at me like, what is he on? And then at a convention I'll be the person who is very clinical and cold about something around people whose entire life is being very emotional and creative. And so I really feel you there about sometimes just feeling like no matter which side of the fence I'm on, it's the wrong side.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah, you're either not enough or you're too much. There's no in between.
hmm
And it doesn't matter. So it's like it's almost like you just have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, even whenever it's like with your friends. Because like there's some times where you're like with the people that are like normally understand you, and then you say something and they just look at you like this. And it's like, okay, yep, I'm uncomfortable right now, but are they actually judging me or did they just not understand me? And then you move on, and then like and sometimes they are judging you, and then you have to be okay with that. And that's really hard, I think, as we're growing up. And then we do that mask like you're talking about, that like okay now I'm going
hmm
to shove it all down and I'm not going to feel it. I'm just going to be like I'm going to wait a beat and then kind of copy everybody else around me so I don't look stupid. And then you lose yourself a little bit. And that's where like being able to be creative does let a safe outlet for all of that, because
hmm
there's a reason to mask it in society, because people are freaking mean and you can literally lose jobs for being the weird person.
yeah.
Yeah.
Writing from early on was important to me in childhood as a way to experiment with what it would be like to be someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of queerness wrapped up in that. You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of like being a queer kid who didn't realize I was a queer kid yet. And then being a queer kid who did realize I was a queer kid and was surrounded by the enemy on all sides, and very much had to put up a false version of myself in order to survive long enough to leave that place. And, you know, I was raised by people who considered themselves, and accurately so, pretty progressive for the place where I was living, which means that they were merely fundamentalist evangelicals. And uh, went out of their way explicitly throughout my childhood to emphasize that the only wrong thing I could ever do was be gay because they had figured out that I was gay. So, really super fun times. And so I got very good at hiding that internal self and having a version of myself outside of that I could present to people. And writing was a really important way to explore what it would be like to not have to be the safe version of myself, things like that. Storytelling was also an important part of that because it was all a way to inhabit somebody else's life for a little bit. And as a consequence, when I was in college, and my fraternity needed people to start a D&D game, I joined the D&D game. And gaming turned into something that I love. And then gaming fed back into becoming a writer again as an adult, and all of these ways of expressing parts of myself ultimately came from a need to express parts of myself that did not feel like I could show to people as myself. The best writing advice I've ever read from anybody was Anne Rice talking about her advice to anyone is write the part of yourself you're afraid that people will see.
Mm.
And that is the part that they will connect with. And the more of the parts of myself that I'm afraid people will see I put in my writing, the more people say that they really got it. My most recent book is a queer cosmic horror ghost story kind of thing set in a little town in Appalachia that is definitely the town that I grew up in, but it is not named the same. And uh, it involves a lot of really personal stuff that I assigned to some of the characters in that book.
Mhm.
And to the point that I was scared to write those parts and scared when I turned it into the publisher that said yes to it first. The end result was that the publisher of that publishing company messaged me and said, I see so much of myself in this character, and I have never seen this much of my experience in a character before. And people who read it say the parts of this that are the scariest are the parts of it that are real, you know? So I don't know. I think that experience we have as writers, I think many of us are looking for a way to tell the world something that we cannot say with our mouths.
Mm-hmm.
That is so
Yeah.
true.
And I think it's like that for a lot of art, really, in general,
Yeah.
I think in one way or another, it's trying to express a part that you can't in other ways. And
Yeah, that jumble up here
yeah.
gets down here somehow so somebody else feels it. Because even if you say it, that doesn't mean that they feel it the same way you feel it. Like, get it
Mhm.
out.
And kind of going back to what we were saying about what you all were saying about like not fitting on either side, I had a thought. I don't know if it's a controversial take, but in my opinion, I feel like the people who are most in tune with who they really are never feel like they fit in any room,
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of the people who are like, yeah, like I feel like I fit on this side or the other side, in some way is conforming to some other opinions that they feel like they have to be completely in that room. Because I think as humans, we're all so diverse. There's no way we can completely be all of ourselves in any space.
Oh my God. And this goes back to every single conversation we've had the past like 2 weeks where it feels like you only feel like a portion of yourself whenever
No,
you
yeah.
change the atmosphere that you're in.
It's a life lesson
We're
I'm
just,
learning.
every single time that we have an interview, things just click in
Yeah.
different ways. This is great.
Yeah.
We're learning so many things. By the time that we're like 80, we're going to be like geniuses.
Sure. Sure.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that this is something that my husband and I have talked about before. I'm going to try to like back at the beginning of this thought. There is no such thing as the average person. There is
Mm.
no one who conforms to every average and every expectation.
Yeah.
And a feature of the queer experience, and I do say feature in the like technological sense, I think it's a bonus of the queer experience. That we are, as young people, presented with paradigms that we know don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to decide what we actually want. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a very uncomfortable experience in a lot of ways, and it is pushed on us a lot younger than we are necessarily developmentally prepared for. But we have to figure out what it is we're into and what it is we want and who we are and what we want out of life in a way that people who see enough overlap between their true selves and those paradigms, that they can just go with it. They
Hmm.
don't have to do that kind of work. Queer people have to do that kind of work. And
Yeah.
so we come out of it much more self aware in a lot of ways. We also have just as much capacity to be terrible people and make mistakes and do all the
Hmm.
normal things that real full people get to do. But I do think that there is a feature of the queer experience where we have to do more self examination than the average
Yeah.
cishet person. I think there are a lot of cishet people who just kind of like take the models that they're given and they try to live them and they find themselves very unhappy. And it's
Hmm.
because they don't get forced to do that sort of work in the way that we do. So they
Hmm.
just wind up in these unhappy lives because they get told that that's what they should want. So they go for it, assuming that once they get it, they'll figure it out. It'll work out somehow. And I don't think that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never really like, I feel like I've thought of it in that way, but never really conceptualized it. But yeah, that's really powerful to like be able to, because we are pushed into those
Yeah.
situations
Hmm.
where other people, aren't
Yeah, and
as
that
much.
that kind of that kind of like brought something back. Like, so I did a lot of women gender sexuality studies courses in school as well, and like one of the main things that we talked about is how like there's that, well, girls mature faster than boys thing, and it's like, no, we don't mature naturally faster than boys. It's just we are forced into situations that we would be unsafe if we didn't have the social awareness to keep ourselves alive.
Hmm.
And like, I think it's like that for any minority. I mean, a lot of times if you grow up in an area where you're not going to automatically be able to do the thing that feels natural to you and be 100% safe, you have to do the self reflection. You have to look at the differences between you and the people around you, whether it's your health or your skin color or who you love. Like, it's all gonna it's all gonna affect you at such a young age. And so like, I think it's very rare that we see people that fully don't have to think about it. It's just some of them have to think about it less. And I am kind of like, half of me is jealous that they don't have to think about it as much. And half of me is like, you know what? I'm glad that we are so thoughtful about ourselves, because that
Mhm.
makes us more thoughtful and empathetic about the people around us, I think.
Yeah. There was a time when I envied that. And that time has passed. I've watched enough of them blow their own lives up.
Mhm.
I'm way more grateful that we have that
Yeah.
experience. That's actually a big part of what draws me to queer horror, in
Mhm.
specific as a writer, because in the horror genre, so many stories are built around there are red flags and warning signs, and people remain in danger because they persist in ignoring those red flags
Mm.
and warning signs. Everybody knows that something's happening to Lucy. Nobody stops and says, "What if it's a vampire?" Everybody knows that somebody's killing the babysitters in town. Nobody stops and says, "What if there's a serial killer on the loose?" Whatever the film is, everybody's stuck on the spaceship and everybody knows people are disappearing. Nobody says, "What if one of those aliens is eating us?" So it takes a sort of above average awareness of oneself and one's circumstances and of the risks to oneself to survive in a horror story. And
Mm.
I think that queer people who are actively living as queer people are more aware than the average person of the dangers that we face. We are accustomed as queer people to being constantly in danger.
Mhm.
But I don't love that we are accustomed to it, but the fact is that we are in danger at all times. And especially
Mm.
right now, we are acutely aware of it. And so, as our trans comrades, as our non-binary comrades, as all the other members of the queer family are actively, aggressively threatened by very powerful people, and we know that that aggression will be turned on us as well, and
Mhm.
we have to be more aware of those threats, and we have to be more willing to stand up for each other and say something on each other's behalf and protect each other. And I think that horror provides a unique opportunity to talk about that aspect of the queer
Mhm.
experience. With my most recent book, one of my goals was, what if I wrote a book in which only the queer people and all the queer people survived?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
all the queer people are the ones who see that something bad is happening. While everybody in the story who is not queer tells themselves it's probably okay. because that's the society that we live in.
Yeah, unfortunately, in our society, that's the exact opposite of what the ending is.
Well,
Well, that's not written.
we don't know
Oh,
yet.
okay, okay,
Let's
okay. You're
hope.
right. You're right. I'm looking at history. Okay. Gosh. Okay.
Let's not get all cynical.
I mean, but in all reality, the reason that they're able to push it off so long is the same thing that oh shit, I even wrote about it in that one article. But the one poem, you probably know what it is. The first they came
Right.
for the Jews and I didn't do
Mhm.
anything because I wasn't a Jew, that one, and then they came for me and I had no one left to stand with me, that one.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
the same thing.
Yeah, because people often don't want. If it's not affecting them, it's easier for them to be like, "Oh,
It's not a danger, it's fine.
it's
It's
fine.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
You're just
You're just
overreacting."
try
Like,
harder.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's fine.
yeah,
They aren't coming after you on the streets. You're making it up.
Right. Yeah.
yeah. That's really powerful. And honestly, like, I'm not even the biggest horror person, but like
Sorry.
hearing you talk about it makes me want to like delve more into the genre and especially read like one of your books. Cause I don't know. I'm really like, I'm not even a reader. So please take this as a compliment.
Yeah, no.
But I'm so like, yes, because the more I'm like talking to people who do horror or like really in it, I never realized how, first of all, how queer horror
Mm-hmm.
is, but just also all the little like nuances that are so woven into it. Um, yeah, it's really powerful. So that I may be taking a dive in.
Yeah, and honestly, we interviewed, how long ago was it that we interviewed Nell Ray?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know. We
Yeah, we
interviewed
have.
Nell Ray. They God, it's
It's
it had to be like
yeah.
April or something like that.
Um,
And Nell Ray is a horror zine author and then also teaches like media literacy, not just with horror, but like focuses on horror mostly.
Hmm.
And like how to pull things apart and how to get things out of it, like about the society or about, whatever and what went into it and stuff like that. And like her zines are really cool. And they're just zines, so they're small. So it's
mhm.
easy to like digest if you're not a reader too, which is nice. But yeah, like I think like honestly, you should check her out. I feel like you two would get along really well. Just like you'd probably spend hours just being like, "Oh, have you seen this?" That'd be really cool. And like all of that kind of reminds me of something that I've been seeing online a lot, where like people are like, I'm really getting annoyed with English teachers being like, "Well, the curtains are blue. What does this signify?" I emailed authors and like they said, "Well, I didn't mean anything by putting this blue curtain in there." And like it's to a point, part of me is like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like having like some things doesn't matter. Like it's fine, whatever. But then also, like, I feel like there's so many subconscious things that we put in everything around us that
Mhm.
it's like, well, the reason everybody's curtains were blue in this year is because of this thing that happened that they did subconsciously because, I don't know, something else was blue, like, so it shows about our society just as much as it shows about the author and about like what their struggles are. So like this whole thing is just making everything about a media deep dive feel very real, and I really want to go in a rabbit hole now.
It's absolutely true, though, that we put stuff in that we didn't consciously mean to,
Mhm.
but that meaning can be stitched out of. And I don't know how much of that is just, I've forgotten the name of the effect now, but seeing faces in clouds. I don't know how much of
Oh,
that is that sort of like assigning of meaning where there is none. To go back to the
Mhm.
beginning, the very beginning, I don't know how much of it is assigning meaning where there is none, and how much of it is just like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I really do think that when we create things, there are parts of ourselves that are active in that creation process that we are not
yeah.
consciously aware of, and that those parts of ourselves do guide us towards things that allow themes to emerge that we did not realize we were putting in there, but that totally
Mm.
are there. There are
Mhm.
parts of every book I've written that if I went back and read it later, I would think, oh, I had no idea that's what I was talking about, but that's clearly what I was talking about. And the same
Mhm.
is true for every writer friend I know. I'll, in the critique group that I'm in, I've read the last novel of a series that one of my friends had written, and I made a comment to her about, there's this certain part of it that I felt like really reflected some themes from earlier in the series and was really subtle and powerful and really showed the development of this character. And literally, she looked at me and said, "Oh, I hadn't noticed that." And I was like, "Well, girlfriend, you're the one who wrote the book." But like we've all had that experience of
Yeah,
just not even realizing that that stuff was cooking away in the background.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a
that's
really
amazing.
important part of it. There's an almost spiritual aspect to it.
Yeah. And I think it then once again just circles back to the creativity being like outside of you, but then flowing through you. So of
Hmm.
course, as it's flowing through you, there's going to be pieces of you that are attached to it that
Hmm.
you may not even realize,
Yeah.
when you're doing it. Um,
It also shows the need for like communication and conversation and community, because like without that mirror that society gives you, and without that, like that, it's almost like whenever you talk to a friend, they are holding up a mirror to explain things to you. Like whenever I don't know what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking, and I call Ellen and I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to write here, can you help me? Then she can be like, oh, you just said it. And I'm like, no, but I didn't understand what I'm saying, can you help me? And then she like literally takes a paragraph of what I was saying and gives me a sentence of like, this is what you said. I'm like, oh shit, cool, that's great that I thought of that without knowing what I was saying, And it's
mhm,
like, it's almost like the shadow work is what I've been seeing a lot
mhm,
online about, like yoga and meditation, shadow work, all that stuff. Like you're figuring out your inner self, but it's so much harder when you're alone.
mhm,
And
Hmm.
so like, especially right now, I feel like community is the most important thing. We've talked about this so many times on this podcast and just in
mhm,
person. Like community is the only way we're going to get through everything, but it's also the only way we're going to heal ourselves and then
Hmm.
help the next generations heal,
mhm.
is community.
Yeah,
And that also comes from this creations that you make, because
that's what I was about to say.
those, like
Yeah.
the novels that you're writing is you communicating to all the people around you. You're creating that community.
Hmm. There was a conversation every week on Blue Sky. There on Wednesday afternoons is this hashtag thing called Horror Writers Chat. It's
Oh,
really fun. It's really interesting to see other people get to be like creative in short little bursts. Sometimes they're like writing prompts. They're like write a one sentence story that starts with this word or whatever. But a lot of times they are tell us briefly this thing about why you write or what you're writing or something. And one of them was what's a theme related to friendship in your work. And I sat and thought about it for a minute, and then I realized in every book that I've written, there are really strong friendships, and those are how the characters survive ultimately. That there are
Mhm,
people around that care about them and that they care about. It adds an extra layer of reason to live, reason to see tomorrow. And another reason I'm really drawn to horror is because there are tons of science fiction and fantasy novels about people who are just like aching to die for something to show how much it meant to them. And horror tells us about people who want to live for something.
mhm,
Horror protagonists are trying to find a reason to survive or trying to find a way to survive because they have a reason to survive. I think that's a
mhm,
much more compelling story, particularly for queer people. I think queer
mhm,
people need reasons to live. We need reasons to survive. We need to be encouraged to have reasons to survive.
mhm,
So uh, that's really important to me about horror as a genre. But in my answer to that, I said I realized that in every book I wrote, friendship provided the community that gave somebody the the step up that they needed to survive. And then in that sense, friendship is a kind of medicine.
mhm,
Community is a kind of medicine. It is a healthcare uh,
mhm,
provider in a lot of ways. It is important to a lot of people's health to have community and friendship and people that they can rely on and people that will listen to them talk about whatever it is they've got going on and people who will offer advice and will offer a soundboard and just be, I don't know, people who will step into the cave that is safe with them and give them the chance to be who they are. I don't know. I have very important friends in my life, And one of them, we go walk sometimes on Sundays. We'll go just like take an hour-long walk together, and we just talk about whatever. But those are some of the most important conversations of my adult life,
Yeah.
because those are just really important times for me to get weird thoughts out and him to get weird thoughts out, and for us to have somebody hear the weird thoughts who's not going to think differently of us afterwards. That part
Yeah.
of trialing out, well, in a lot of ways, it's like the writing that I did as a kid. It's a way of trying out different ideas, you know.
Mhm.
Can you just say them in front of somebody that isn't going to judge you for saying them, and then see how they sound? And sometimes I'll say stuff to them and then think, oh, I actually think I think that, now that I've said it aloud.
Yeah.
That's an important
Sometimes it
function
does
of
take
friendship.
talking outside and like
Hmm.
hearing it to like
Yeah.
audio process it almost.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Well, this honestly has been amazing. I feel like
It
we
has
could
been.
talk for 10 years. um,
I can totally do that. No problem.
as we're rounding out towards like the hour mark, was there anything you wanted to mention that maybe we didn't get to, or anything you want to plug, socials?
Oh, sure. So my website is michaelgwilliamsbooks.com. I have links to all of my books there. My most recent novel is called Children of Solitude. It's about a guy who frankly is kind of a mean queen, whose horrible mother has finally died, and he goes to clean out her house and has all sorts of surprises waiting for him, including that maybe her house is haunted or maybe it's worse than that.
Mm.
And also his favorite porn star inexplicably lives next door. And so he has to decide whether he wants to stick around in order to try to get to know this guy and deal with whatever is in the house and the possibility that the house has lured him back a second time. So it's a really fun horror novel about characters that are really imperfect and that I deeply love. And um, I also have a novelette. It's like 15,000 words in an anthology called Queer Power, and it's a collection of horror stories of queer people surviving. And mine is about a vampire in Key West, Florida, on New Year's Eve, 1984, who meets a new serial killer and has to decide whether to not get along with this guy or to take him under his wing. And I felt like that was a lot of fun to write.
So fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so you know, we have a book club every single month. It meets in Raleigh. Where are
Hmm.
you located?
Pittsburgh.
Okay, okay. So we meet in Raleigh at the Little Blue Bakehouse. That's
Hmm.
right, right? Okay. The last Tuesday of every month at 6:30. And right now we just got started. We just read our first book. We're set to read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck
Yeah.
Tingle. Yeah, we're
Hmm.
set to read that one for August. And we're voting currently for September. But Ellen is the one who runs it, so I'm gonna send her your stuff because she can add it to the list for us to all vote on. Because voting feels like a fair way to
Absolutely.
get the stuff in. But I'm going to send that to her. But I would love for you to come to book club at some point. If there's ever a book that you see that we're doing that you would like to come to, I would love to just hear your thoughts on a lot of this stuff because I feel like sometimes it's hard to get people to do the deep dive because they don't want to sound like a weird person. But like whenever you get like two people that are already like, yes, let's do a deep dive, then people are like, oh my gosh, yes, I saw that too. And so like having multiple people there, I think that would be really fun.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I am always down to do the deep dive on something.
Yes.
I am very comfortable with being a weirdo.
Okay, me
So,
too. Me
yeah.
too. But sometimes my brain doesn't work, so the deep dive doesn't go well because my brain's just like, I read the book and now I forget everything about it. So
Yeah.
there is also that.
Me.
But then when somebody else says it, I remember it. But when you were explaining one of your books, it reminded me actually of a book that I read. It's called, hang on, I just looked it up just to make sure. Just Like Home. Have you read that book, Just Like
Yeah.
Home?
Uh-uh.
Oh my
Haven't heard of
gosh.
it.
Just Like Home. It's by Sarah Gailey. It's a gothic thriller. It was interesting, and it's about a house that brings her back
Mm. Yeah, I
when
would
her mom is
definitely like to
dying.
read it.
You should
Mhm.
you should check. When you read that, you should let me know what you think.
I will. There's a big trend in horror at the moment of basically a bunch of us talking about what it's like to get older and to have our parents die. And like that's just a thing that's happening in horror. There are a lot of books out right now about a character who has to clean out a dead parent's house or go deal
Yes.
with a dying parent. And that's
Mhm.
just a factor of a bunch of horror writers having reached a certain age. And so we're talking about what we're going through. Um, and so I love stories like that. I
Yeah.
was thrilled to get to write one. Um, my therapist said he's going to read it. So,
Oh, okay.
and and the next book I'm writing is a horror retelling of Great Gatsby called Gatsby with an at symbol where the A would be, and it is
Ooh,
about it's a retelling of the Great Gatsby, but it's set in the Bay Area in 1999 in the lead up to Y2K.
I love.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
I will be adding your books to my never-ending TBR. Um, well, thank you so much for coming. This was amazing.
Mhm.
I'm definitely going to stay in touch.
Oh yeah, thank
Um,
you so much for having me. This was a super fun time.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
We're glad that you feel comfortable chatting with us and being vulnerable with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah,
Do you have like Instagram, any other socials other than your website?
I mostly do Blue Sky.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I have a link to Blue Sky from there. I have a link to
Okay.
all of my various social media on michaeljwilliamsbooks.com,
Awesome.
but my Blue Sky username is McManly Pants.
Awesome.
I love it.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much for everything again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I hope you have a wonderful. Oh my God, I'm like, what is today?
Today's
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Happy hump day.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly. Y'all too.
All right.
bye.
Have a really good
Bye.
rest of your day.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank
Yes, thank you.
you.
Thank you so much for watching the Queer Vision podcast. Once again, I am Koe Star or Koe of Kanekalon, and this is
Hi, I'm Becca.
we are the co-hosts and co-founders of the Queer Vision Pod and Queeralina. You can find us on also all socials at queeralina.org. We are Nasty Queer and Queer Vision Mag. You can also find all Michael's information at michaelgwilliams.com, and that will have all his socials and everything else. This was an amazing podcast. It was so great just to dive into creative processing, and horror has so many things that I always
That you never knew.
underestimate. I always underestimate the beauty of horror. Anyway, we're learning new things every day. I hope y'all have a good one.
Go get creative.
Yes.